So the other day I was playing Mario Kart with friends, and they were getting frustrated as I was too good at the game. At some point they started asking for tips and tricks so that they could improve as well. The thought came to me then, what if I made a video dispelling all of my Mario Kart knowledge, since I have no other place to put it? So that's what I'm going to do. First I'm going to go over the gameplay mechanics, since that's what most of you are actually here for, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty stuff later. Literally one of the first things you can do to get ahead of your opponents is the starting boost. If you hold the acceleration button a little bit after the number 2 shows up, then you'll be granted a decent speed boost off of the starting line. The starting boost can be failed if you time it too early or too late. Time it too early and you'll burn out and then have to do the drive of shame back to the pack ahead of you. Timing it too late only gives you a subpar boost, so it's not exactly a failure, but still not great. Practice this as it's your first chance to get ahead. Drafting is when you stay directly behind another player for a small amount of time, which grants you a small boost in speed, letting you get ahead of them. Just be careful because some people become wary of this and will drop an item on you. So it should be pretty obvious that turning in this game, like in every other racing game, is slower than driving straight, and the same thing goes for drifting, but more on that later. Mainly your goal is to travel as straight as possible, and to end your drifts in a way that allows you to travel straight to the next turn. This is mainly used in time trials since you don't have to worry about dropped items and other players, but it is worth doing. If you hit the ZR button while driving, you'll do a little hop. If you hold either left or right and do a hop, you'll start drifting when you land. This is how you take tight turns, and yes, you can finally turn off the smart steering. I'm not naming names, but you know who you are. So there are actually 4 different forms of drifting, and each has their own use, which I'll go into now. Wiggle drifting is the first kind of drifting, and everyone does this whether they think about it or not. Wiggle drifting is when you kind of wiggle the control stick left and right to keep from going too tight or too wide around a turn. Wiggle drifting is one of the fastest at charging mini turbos, and is also the slowest form of drifting since you're constantly moving the control stick in cardinal directions. So try to avoid doing it if you can, and commit to your turns a little more. So pretty much everyone does the wiggle drifting, but what if you did nothing with the control stick after starting a drift? Well, that's called neutral drifting, and it's exactly that. There really isn't much use for this aside from big wide turns like in Mario Kart 8's Mario Circuit, or in Water Park for you 200cc fans. There's also not much for practice since it requires you to literally do nothing aside from starting the drift. Its usefulness is more in terms of speed, since neutral drifting is the fastest form of drifting out of the 4. Despite this, it also happens to be the slowest at charging mini turbos, so use it in the right situations. Soft drifting is one of the best drifting mechanics out of the 4, and it takes a little bit of explaining. When you drift, you usually go in between cardinal left or right to keep yourself in line with a turn. This is great and all, but it's actually slow compared to the other kinds of drifting. Instead, what you should do is hold the control stick at a 45-degree angle. This will actually make you move faster while drifting and still charge mini turbos quickly. The only downside being that your drift becomes slightly wider and more committal. This shouldn't be all that bad because some of you could use a little more commitment in your lives. Last but not least, we have brake drifting. If you hit the brake button while drifting, you'll slow down, which can allow you to take super tight turns or save you from completely flying off of the course. This can be tricky because it requires you to hold the acceleration button and the brake button at the same time, but it's definitely worth the practice due to its versatility. The other thing I'll mention is that if you hold the brake button for too long, you can actually end your drift entirely, so don't hit the brake button too much. It's not exactly necessary in 150cc, except for the hairpin turn on Mario Kart 8's Rainbow Road, and when you want to fix a bad drift line. It's mainly used in 200cc since you're always moving so fast. Now that you've worked through your commitment issues, I'll go over the rewards for committing to your drifts. If you hold a drift for a certain amount of time, you'll charge a mini turbo, which is indicated by blue sparks coming out from your wheels and gives you a small speed boost when the drift is released. If you continue to hold the drift after charging a mini turbo, then you get a super mini turbo, which is indicated by orange sparks and lasts longer than a normal mini turbo. If you continue to hold a drift after charging the super mini turbo, then you get an ultra mini turbo, which is indicated by purple sparks and lasts the longest out of the 3. Essentially, your goal is to charge these bad boys up as much as you can in order to move the fastest. Coins aren't only for unlocking stuff. They're actually one of the most crucial things needed for winning races. There's a coin counter on the bottom left of your screen, and basically this tells you your accessible top speed. What I mean by this is that you really only have about 94% of your top speed when you have 0 coins, and every coin collected adds about 0.6% to your top speed for a grand total of 6%. This doesn't sound like a lot, but the difference shows when you take a look at these two different time trial attempts. One is done without coins, and the other is done with coins. You'll notice about a 6-second time difference between the two. When it comes to collecting coins, collecting them on the course will give you 1 coin, getting one out of an item box will give you 2, and being hit by an item falling off the course or hitting a track hazard will cause you to lose 3 coins. If you ever wondered how some people can just get ahead of you and stay ahead, then it would be safe to assume it's due to good coin management. So stay greedy, folks. So this one is actually a trick that's new to me, but essentially it allows you to fly really far off of bounce pads like the ones in DK Jungle or Mushroom Gorge, but I'll use DK Jungle for this example. What you have to do is drift off of the ramp and then release your drift right before you land on the bounce pad and then immediately trick. If done successfully, then you'll fly way further than you normally would. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's well worth it. The glider sections in the game might look innocent, but there are some sickening things that you can do with gliders. But first, the basics. There are 2 different kinds of glider sections, the first being the cannon glider section, and the second being normal glider sections. The cannon glider section is incredibly mundane, as there really isn't anything you can do except for one thing, and that's known as fast glider. Fast glider is achieved when you hop and land right at the edge of the cannon glider panel. All this does is make your glider come out a few frames faster, which is like, great, I guess. This technique isn't super worth it, but the worst that can happen is that you pull out your glider normally, so go nuts with it. The second kind of glider section is one I'll call a normal glider, and it's the one that lets you float around freely. Normal glider sections have a great deal of things you can do to move faster, and the first is drifting off of glider panels. So the way most people approach glider panels is to drive up to it and then trick, which is okay. Some will mini turbo and trick, which is slightly better, and then those that are truly galaxy brained will mini turbo into the glider panel without tricking, or drift off of the glider panel without tricking. The reason for this is because of how the game handles your speed when tricking off of glider panels. So here's another example, and this one's gonna require arbitrary speed values. Let's assume that your ground speed is set to 30, your glider speed when tricking is set to 40, and lastly your mini turbo speed is set to 50. Driving off the glider panel without tricking will keep your speed at 30, which is slow. Tricking off of the glider panel will bring your speed from 30 to 40 with the boost you get from tricking. Slightly better than just driving off the glider panel. Most people will mini turbo into the glider panel and then trick. This is where you learn that doing this is actually not the best option, because the game resets your speed back to 40 when you trick off of the glider panel, meaning that you go from 30 to 50 back to 40, and then the mini turbo will speed you back up to 50. Mini turboing into the glider panel is totally fine since you have a speed of 50, but it's doing the trick that slows you down. So a better option is to mini turbo into the glider panel without tricking at all, so your speed doesn't get reset. The actual best option here is to drift off of the glider panel. What happens here is that the game will force your drift to end when you pull out your glider, and it grants you whatever mini turbo you have charged. This means that you go straight from 30 to 50 right when you pull your glider out, thus giving you the highest possible speed for the longest amount of time. The other reason drifting off of glider panels is the best option is due to being a perfect setup for glider vectoring. Glider vectoring is one of the most useful mechanics in the game because it allows you to go very fast through glider sections which are typically slow. When boosting off of glider panels, either with mini turbos or mushrooms, you hold left or right, as well as up or down. For some reason, the game doesn't know what to do with the boost speed when you travel horizontally and vertically, so it'll just stack both at the same time, which can make you go through glider sections much faster. I highly recommend learning this one since you move super fast and it looks really cool. The last glider technique I'll go into is literal insanity, and extremely difficult to perform since it requires motion controls to be turned on. So we all know that you can use the control stick to turn, and that you can use motion controls to turn. But what if we used both at the same time in a glider section? Well, similar to glider vectoring with the game stacking speeds, the game will stack inputs when using a control stick and motion controls in glider sections. What you do is use both of these to turn so sharp in the air that your cart literally goes sideways. Add glider vectoring to this and you'll get insane amounts of speed stacked up, which allows for some very crazy shortcuts. Now for the bad news bears. This technique's difficulty pretty much makes it useless to online races, since you don't have enough time to pause, turn on motion controls, unpause, do the turn, and then pause again to turn off motion controls. So it remains a time trial strategy for the most part, unless you're maniacal enough to play with motion controls on all the time. And if you do that, then I salute to you because you're probably better than most players. Also note that the input stacking only works in glider sections. You can't stack the inputs on the ground to turn sharper, unfortunately. Now that we've gone through all of the gameplay mechanics and stuff, it's time to get into the more specific things that can help you win races. I'm going to throw a disclaimer out now. Everything I'm about to tell you will not make you go from 12th to 1st. This information is just to squeeze out that last little bit of potential for you in case you need it. When in the Kart Builder menu, you can press Start or plus to bring up the stats menu. This will show you most of the stats that are available in the game. I say most because the game hides incredibly valuable information from you, and I'm not really sure why. The stats that are visible in the game are speed, acceleration, weight, handling, and traction. The missing stats are mini turbo and invincibility. Now I know it's only 2 stats that aren't shown, but the importance of the mini turbo stat far outweighs everything else. I'll quickly explain all of these here so you know exactly what we're dealing with. The speed stat is how fast you move, or your overall top speed. Apparently the game also hides the fact that the speed stat only corresponds to your speed on the ground. There are stats for your speed in water, in the air, and in anti-gravity, but for the most part, none of these will be as important as your ground speed. The last thing I'll mention is that having the highest top speed in the game isn't worth it since there will never be enough straightaways for you to actually achieve it. Turning and drifting slows you down, and there are a lot of turns in Mario Kart courses, so don't throw all of your build options towards speed. Acceleration is how quickly you get to your top speed, and this stat matters a decent amount since getting to your top speed is crucial for winning races. Choosing karts with high acceleration stats is good if you tend to lose yourself a bit or get hit by items a lot. I recommend this for beginners since trading speed for acceleration isn't exactly worth it until you learn how to properly defend yourself with items. Weight is one of the most important guiding factors for choosing kart builds. Weight also helps determine a lot of other important stats like speed and acceleration. Generally, the heavier your kart build is, the more you can expect a higher top speed and lower acceleration. Lighter kart builds will generally have lower top speed and higher acceleration, so choose your build wisely. Handling is how sharp your kart can turn. Handling also suffers like the speed stat and has stats for your handling in water, in the air, and in anti-gravity, but it's not shown. Traction is another not so useful stat. It really only tells you how slippery you are on any off-road terrain or even wet roads. That's about it. The mini turbo stat is by far the most important stat in the game, and it's crazy to me that it's not even shown in the game. Essentially, the mini turbo stat is directly correlated to charge time and boost length. Higher mini turbo stats will have a quicker charge time and longer boost length, meaning that you can charge more mini turbos and stay in boost longer. Remember what I said earlier about those arbitrary speed values? You want to try to keep your speed at 50 for as long as possible, and the mini turbo stat is exactly what'll do it for you. What good is your top speed if you constantly charge mini turbos, which are faster than your ground speed? This is why when you look at world record time trials, you'll notice that most of them are done with kart builds that have high mini turbo stats. All they're doing is charging as many mini turbos as they possibly can in order to move the fastest. Though, as important as the mini turbo stat is, it's not the end all be all because you still have to deal with items, track hazards, and other players, so make sure you build your karts with a good balance on weight, speed or acceleration, and mini turbo. I didn't even know that the invincibility stat was a thing, but yeah, I guess we all learned something today. The invincibility stat is how long you stay invincible after being hit by an item. If you ever notice the items will break on you after you've already been hit, then you know what I'm talking about. Just make sure not to spam multiple attack items when someone is in front of you, because only one is going to hit, making the others useless. Space out your item throws to really deal damage to the person in front of you. Now here's a knowledge bomb. All of the characters in the game also have the same stats as the karts, wheels, and gliders. Yes, even your character choice affects all of your stats. Thankfully, the stats follow the same rules as the karts, wheels, and gliders, so if you want higher speed and lower acceleration, go for heavier characters. If you want a more well-rounded experience, then go for medium weight characters. Lastly, if you want more acceleration and less speed, then go for the small characters. I can't really speak on the mini turbo stat for the characters, since that varies too much between all of them. What I will do though is leave a link to a helpful website called MK8DX Builder. This website allows you to build all your combos and see their stats in real time as you build it. It's great for checking out new builds you want to try out, and seeing what works best, or even just seeing some of the hidden stats for your current build. You can also find this information in the Mario Wiki. Definitely give those websites a look sometime. This part could literally make this video 3 hours long if I really tried, but the goal for this video is to make it as short as possible while still getting as much key information in as I can. In essence, I'm going to keep things rather brief for the items. One general rule for all throwable items is that distance is tied to speed. You throw items further if you're moving faster. Now onto the items themselves. The banana is a defensive item that is also draggable. Triple bananas will revolve around the player, and can be destroyed if you run into another player, or items. You still need to be careful and drop a banana if a red shell comes your way, since they can sometimes slip into the gap between bananas and hit you. Ah yes, the green shell. Its versatility knows no bounds. A draggable item that can be used offensively and defensively. When thrown, it will bounce 4 times, breaking on the 5th. Players mainly use it as a defensive item, but if you like to be disrespectful like me, then you usually try to get a nasty snipe on the person in front of you, or teach a lesson to the person trying to catch a draft behind you. Red shells are just the green shell's cooler older brother, or the Vegeta of the two shells if you will. Red shells behave differently than green shells in that they will target the person in front of you, and it will always take the center of the course to get there. Throwing it backward will make it go in a straight line and break on the first impact. Also, if you throw the red shell too close to your opponent, then the red shell will have to do a full circle around the track and then hit the opponent. So be careful how you throw them and where you throw them. Blue shells are like an assassin who has only learned Russian stealth. It's not quiet about what it's doing, and it will take you out if you get in its way. Your best bet is just to get out of its way or ignore it unless you're in first place, in which case you're pretty much effed. Blue shells do show up in the minimap, so if you happen to see it, then let someone else pass you and let them take the hit. I will advise that this doesn't always work since the shell will stay locked on a target once it gets close enough, but it's your best bet without the super horn or mushrooms. Bob-ombs are one of the most toxic items in the game. It's a bomb. They explode. They have a pretty big explosive radius, so throwing them in the center of the track will hit just about anyone. They are draggable, but be careful since you can't outrun the explosion on 150cc if a red shell hits it. The mushroom is the most iconic item in the game, and all it does is give you a speed boost forward. It's great for taking shortcuts and dodging blue shells, but not much else aside from that. The triple variant will revolve around you and give other players speed boosts if they run into your mushrooms, but they can't be stolen. The golden mushroom allows you to use infinite boosts, but it's on a timer. Bullet bills will turn you into a bullet bill. I didn't think I had to explain that one. And shoot you forward at great speed, knocking anyone out of the way, all while being invincible. It plays the game for you. The blooper will ink on your screen, covering it up a bit and ruining your traction. It will go away after a certain amount of time, or you can just go into water, use a mushroom, or get any other kind of speed boost to make it go away. The lightning bolt is pretty neat in that it strikes every single player on the course except for the user, making them small and slow. The closer you are to first, the longer the effects last. If you want to be toxic, then use it when people are flying in glider sections. The star is also super iconic. Using it will make you invincible and increase your speed significantly, and anyone that you run into gets demolished and robbed of their lunch money. The Fire Flower lets you throw 10 fireballs forward or backward and is also on a time limit. You can either use these sparingly or make a giant wall of pain for everyone to run into. They do also bounce off walls a couple times, so beware of how you throw them. It's a boomerang. it does what boomerangs do. The boomerang can be thrown up to 3 times, and it will also hit multiple people and destroy items on the track as well as draggable items. This item does leave your inventory slot when thrown, so if you have another item in slot 2, it will be brought up to slot 1, and then the boomerang will take slot 2 when it comes back. If you happen to fill both slots before the boomerang comes back, then it will not come back and break. The piranha plant is a versatile item. Using it will give you small speed boosts, and the piranha will eat just about anything in front of it, from dropped items to the players themselves. It is on a time limit though, so make sure you use it as much as you can before it goes. Ah yes, the super horn, probably the greatest item in the game. When used, the super horn will blast out sound waves, destroying anything within its radius, even blue shells. If you manage to get one of these, then make sure you use it wisely. The Crazy 8 item gives you 8 items, and they'll all circle around you. It gives you a mushroom, star, blooper, coin, green shell, red shell, and a bob-omb. The star and coin can be stolen while they're revolving around you, and the bob-omb will explode if someone or something touches it. If the bob-omb does happen to go off, you can't escape the explosion, then you can say goodbye to the rest of your items. I usually spam these so no one gets the chance to steal anything, or just to get it out of my inventory. If you want to use one item specifically, then you have to wait until it's directly in front of you to use it. The coin is a borderline useless item aside from getting your coin count closer to 10. The likelihood of pulling a coin from an item box vastly increases the closer you are to first, with first place almost always pulling a coin if you don't already have one. The way to avoid this is to hold a coin, because the game will never give you 2 of the same item at once. This is true until lag is involved, by the way. Also, keeping a coin in your first slot is a good idea, just in case a boo happens to show up and steal your item. The boo will make you transparent and invincible for like 10 seconds. The boo will also steal an item from a random person in front of you, and if no one in front of you has an item, then you'll be blessed with a single mushroom. And there you have it. This is everything you need to know about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in a relatively short amount of time. I decided to not cover course strategies and nuanced item and character strategies because I feel like those can be explored on your own, and finding the meta build and stuff is super easy. I just wanted to go over the stuff that will help you become a more formidable racer, and give you some knowledge to help you form your own strategies. Also, doing so would make this video 5 hours long, and nobody wants that. Now go out there and absolutely decimate your competition. Have a great day!